I don't know if my relationship was abusive. Miem/20, her F/20. I have omitted a significant amount of information because if I included everything, it would turn into an entire autobiography, and I'm quite exhausted. Therefore, please maintain an impartial perspective, as she also has her side of the narrative, and there is not enough context provided. Approximately 6 to 7 months ago, I, male, 20, autistic, ended my relationship with my ex, female, 20. She was my first genuine relationship, and I was utterly infatuated. We were high school sweethearts who somehow managed to reconnect 4 years later. We had a history, and it felt like destiny had intervened. During those 4 years apart, I fell into a deep depression where I smoked cannabis daily, failed multiple college courses, frequently partied, and drank heavily. It was so detrimental that those years set me back tremendously, and my memories of that time are quite foggy. However, when we reconnected, our text conversations for a few days were electrifying, and I felt like a carefree child again, swinging my legs and twirling my hair. Eventually, one night, we met up and took a pleasant walk through my local park until the temperature dropped, prompting me to invite her to my place to relax. We talked for hours, catching up until it grew late and she ordered a rideshare. We would exchange texts almost daily, and once a week, she would visit me, and we would order takeout, watch movies, and truly enjoy one another's presence. Those evenings were filled with laughter, joy, and a profound understanding, something I had never experienced before. However, by the 4th week of following our routine, while watching a film, she moved closer, rested her head on my shoulder, and wrapped her arm around mine. With our hands touching, I gently played with her fingers. We locked eyes and she rubbed her nose against mine. We became intimate. As the night dragged on, eventually, she needed to return home. I walked her to the door and stood watching her leave until her rideshare turned the corner and departed. It felt surreal, with a whirlwind of emotions coursing through me, most of them positive, but fear standing out most prominently. After she arrived home, we texted. I can't recall precisely what happened, but I expressed that I was apprehensive about our relationship. I struggle significantly with communication, especially through text, so she interpreted my message as a desire for something casual. She became quite upset, and I spent the entire night texting, trying to calm her down and clarify her interpretation of my words, as I did not want to miscommunicate. In the end, we mutually agreed that we wanted to take things slow and that we would make our relationship official on a meaningful date. Writing this now seems ridiculous, but it made sense at the time. We effectively acted like a couple, engaging in all the typical couple activities and having our profile pictures and bios match, yet we just weren't official. I felt somewhat uneasy about this arrangement, but I dismissed my concerns because it seemed to work. In the early days of our unofficial relationship, we discussed boundaries and the expectations we sought from one another. The only request I had of her was to be patient. She provided a lengthy list of her expectations, which I acknowledged as reasonable since she understands what she desires. The 2 main demands she presented were that I quit smoking cannabis cold turkey and focus on my college studies. I agreed to both as they were fair requests, but as time progressed, her demands kept expanding and evolving, and some felt unreasonable. When we talked it out, they became non-negotiable, and it was frustrating trying to meet all of them. She insisted that I text her before engaging in any activity. If my family asked for my assistance, I had to notify her beforehand. Even minor errands, like going to the shop without data or credit, required a heads up. It was overwhelming to keep her informed about everything I did. We discussed this, and she explained it was due to my tendency to vanish for hours, leaving her on, delivered, or read. We would communicate every night, so even if I inadvertently left her on, read, it wouldn't have exceeded 5 to 7 hours. She never required me to seek permission for my actions. She merely claimed that I kept her in the dark. It became extremely frustrating, and I would feel anxious if I did not notify her. Eventually, I adapted to it and felt proud that I could accommodate her needs. The next issue stemmed from my anxiety. I have had anxiety and depression since childhood, having previously self-harmed and even attempted to take my life. I utilized cannabis as a coping mechanism. It enabled me to feel normal, even if it made me lethargic. Years of heavy smoking 5 times a day had ruined me, and the withdrawals were severe. I experienced random panic attacks, a complete loss of appetite, constant fatigue, severe brain fog, and the worst of all, insomnia. I would sometimes be awake for literal days, with 4 days being my maximum. In many weeks, I couldn't even tell if I slept or merely imagined it. It was hell. Yet I did not smoke, not once. The sole time I could sleep was when she was beside me, soothing my forehead while humming. Knowing that I couldn't fall asleep unless she did this, she still insisted I stay awake until she drifted off, as it made her feel secure. I never complained. I was utterly exhausted, searching for anything to help: sleeping gummies, exercise, hot showers. I tried every suggestion I found online. Until one night I purchased a carton of cider and consumed the entire box. I slept like a baby. Each night I drank just to sleep. I gained weight, and my sleep was hardly refreshing. I felt worse than before, but I was desperate for a full night's rest. I was embarrassed by this, and she soon noticed, but I deceived her, claiming the empty bottles and cans belonged to my brothers. She clearly didn't believe me and, concerned, made me promise to stop, which I did. I was still expected to sleep last, but sleep almost never came. I began drinking again, hiding the receipts and containers while lying through my teeth, even as I developed a bloated beer belly. The irony is that I despise alcohol, but hated being sober and dealing with insomnia more. I managed to cope, and the relationship continued. We officially became a couple during a trip to Winter Wonderland. However, it did not unfold as planned. I had promised to ask her to be official while we were there, but the overwhelming crowds and sensory overload led me to forget. She made a casual remark about it while we were showering together at the hotel. I felt disappointed in myself, but she didn't seem to make a fuss, and we overlooked it. Due to insomnia and persistent hangovers from drinking myself to sleep, I became extraordinarily lazy more than when I was smoking. I fell into a rut for weeks, skipped school, and lied to her and my family about my attendance. The only times I showered and cleaned myself up were when she came over, or I went to her place. I dreaded going to her house. She lived in a rough neighborhood, and every time something bad occurred, like being a victim of a hate crime, getting robbed, or encountering a problem with someone, it was near her home. I tried to limit my visits, and even expressed to her that I didn't feel safe there, additionally mentioning that her family made me uncomfortable due to their racist attitudes and the numerous microaggressions I faced. However, she was distressed that she spent most of her time at my place and that I was reluctant to visit hers, despite knowing my reasons. She also claimed she often felt homesick. Thus, I gritted my teeth and tried my best not to voice my complaints. I visited her nearly 4 times a week. On one occasion, her white brother walked into her room and made an inappropriate comment before realizing I was present. I went silent and wanted to leave immediately, but she wanted me to stay. I did stay, not because she coerced or pressured me, but simply because I did not want to abandon her. After a few months, things started to feel more normal until her friends came to visit. I felt extremely anxious and apprehensive. First impressions are crucial, especially with your girlfriend's best friends. Before their arrival, she went to HMV to buy them a small gift and asked me to hold it. She apparently instructed me to hide it, but I didn't recall her saying that amid my overwhelming anxiety. When she walked off to meet her friends, I stood stiffly, my arms at my sides, gift exposed in my hands. As she approached with her friends, I awkwardly waved and smiled. Upon getting closer, she realized I was holding the gift out instead of hiding it, and she slapped me in the face in front of her friends. I couldn't even gauge their reactions, as I was too embarrassed to look them in the eye. They all quickly acted as though nothing occurred. We returned to HMV to browse, and I attempted to make small talk with them. When my girlfriend and I found some distance from her friends, I expressed my feelings, saying something along the lines of, "There was no need for that, especially in front of your friends. You embarrassed me and ruined my day," though not those exact words. She apologized, but insisted she had told me to hide the gift, which made me doubt her sincerity. After that, she acted as though nothing had happened, and we never talked about it. I quickly got over it, thinking it was just a typical female reaction, as I had seen in various media that it was common for women to slap men in frustration. It is not pleasant. The dynamics began to shift significantly. She stated that her body was rejecting me. Her hairline receded, and no matter my grooming efforts, my beard caused her bad acne. She started to refuse kisses and affection from me because of this, and our time together diminished. She spent more time with her friends, citing that they did not cause her stress. I felt hurt but didn't voice my discomfort, as I understood she had her university commitments, and I didn't want to add to her pressures. We didn't see each other for almost 3 weeks, despite her living just down the street. She rejected all my compliments and affirmations, which constituted one of my primary love languages. I would compliment her outfits, her smile, her artwork, and her hard work in school. I supported her wholeheartedly, and offered no hints of doubt when she received high marks in her art course, which enabled her to secure a spot at her top university choice with a low acceptance rate. I felt immense pride for her with my Instagram holding 0 images of myself and solely photos of her. However, whenever I expressed my support genuinely, she would scoff, roll her eyes, laugh at me, or suggest I sounded like a robot or artificial intelligence. This interaction wounded me profoundly. I attempted to discuss it with her, but she took it defensively as an accusation, stating something along the lines of, "As a man, it's entitled of you to expect a positive response from a woman after complimenting her." I was bewildered and unsure how to process it. I didn't intend to invalidate her feelings. As being an autistic man, I often miss certain gendered nuances. I never anticipated or required a positive reaction. I only sought acknowledgement of my love. My compliments carried multiple layers of meaning, reflecting my genuine friendship with her, as she was my best friend. This situation made me feel somewhat irrational because whenever I attempted to initiate conversations about things that upset me, they were either dismissed or linked back to my masculinity. When I sought to understand her perspective genuinely, she would terminate the conversation in frustration or anger before any constructive discussion could happen, and I would ultimately feel compelled to apologize. I made every effort to consider the timing, her mood, and her recent experiences, striving to account for all variables before bringing up sensitive topics so as not to initiate discussions at inappropriate times. She would never apply the same consideration. I'm writing this now because I just had a conversation and inadvertently shared everything I have written here, which visibly upset her. She comforted me afterward. I felt confused when she asserted that it sounded abusive, claiming that even a single slap constitutes abuse. However, I feel conflicted, as I was also quite toxic. I lied, harbored resentment, and acted inappropriately in ways I have not detailed, such as rejecting physical affection because I felt hurt that she neglected my love language, so I retaliated. Many of my friends and family hold biased perspectives that further complicate my thoughts. When I present my viewpoint, they only receive my side of the story and often remain biased. Reflecting on the relationship feels like a mixture of emotions. When things were good, they were exceptionally good, but I occasionally recall her actions that were hurtful. She could be unkind and express anger when I would not engage in arguments. She would uplift me when I got things right but was often critical whenever I fell short, and to her, I failed frequently. Story 2. My 23F friend is trying to end the friendship with me, 24F, over our mutual friends, 24F and 23M, dating. Hello everyone. To simplify, I will refer to myself as me or X, the friend wishing to end the friendship as F1 and the other two as F2 and M1. Let me begin by saying that F1, F2, and I were quite close friends prior to this situation. However, F2 and I were friends prior to that, and we formed a trio once F1 joined. Additionally, all parties were friends before any of this began, and F2, M1, and I remain close friends. We were all at the same university. Now we attend different campuses. Me, F1, and F2 are in the same city, while F2 and M1 are in a long-distance relationship. 2 summers ago, M1 had feelings for F2, but it did not develop into anything. At the beginning of the semester, around late September, F1 and M1 began a relationship that eventually led to them dating. F2 was supportive, as F1 and F2 discussed it to avoid hurt feelings. The relationship between M1 and F1 was unusual, as they decided to break up in mid-November to early December because there weren't enough feelings for this stage in the relationship. I found this reasoning intriguing, but I refrained from discussing it further since I did not understand it and did not want to complicate matters for F1. Naturally, F1 turned to F2 and me for support, and invited us to accompany her to bars. A crucial detail is that late November and early December is when university becomes overwhelming due to end-of-semester deadlines and exams approaching. F2 and I tried to support our friend as much as possible, listening to her emotions, providing a shoulder to cry on, etc. This included statements like, "I'm sure I love him now," or "I don't want to end up alone," which I considered standard post-breakup dialogue, though being 24, I realize my experiences are limited. After 2 weeks of daily crying sessions with F1, F2 and I began to feel emotionally drained, as we had our own issues to manage along with the academic workload. Our first mistake was not communicating this to F1 immediately and instead declining plans or canceling on her, which understandably upset her, though she communicated this to us weeks later. Now, weeks later, around mid-March, our university was hosting a small school dance. During this time, M1 called me to ensure he could be in a specific area of campus since he wanted to avoid F1, who had requested not to see him in person, fairly challenging, as we were all studying together in the same building. I must admit, the situation was becoming overwhelming, but it felt like it wasn't my place to interfere. As for the dance, M1 changed his mind about attending every 2 hours for approximately 4 days before the event. F1 was uncertain about attending because she wanted to avoid M1. F2 and I encouraged F1 to go anyway, as F1 usually enjoys such events. On our way to pre-drink with some other friends, F2 and I received a message that M1 would be attending, so we informed F1. To make a long story short, F1 ended up very intoxicated, broke down, and began crying with statements such as, "I really love him," and "I'm angry at F2 and X for not telling me," which seemed like typical drunken expressions. Neither F2 nor I were present for this moment, as I was looking after another friend and F2 was escorting someone home. The following day, my boyfriend, who is a mutual friend of F1 and me, received an angry message from F1 regarding me. Upon receiving the information, I was briefed by another friend about what transpired during my absence, and both F2 and I decided to approach F1 to resolve the issue. During our conversation, we heard phrases like, "You abandoned me," and "Why didn't you inform me sooner?" We explained to F1 that we had held off on mentioning anything because we were uncertain of M1's intentions for the dance and did not want to cause F1 any additional stress. The three of us managed to talk it through, though the friendship never fully recovered afterward. Fast forward to the end of August, M1 confided in me that he had developed feelings for F2 and sought my advice on how to proceed due to the previous history with F1, as he did not want anyone to feel uncomfortable. I immediately informed him that I would listen and offer minimal advice, as I was aware this situation could become complicated, and I wished to remain uninvolved. Unsurprisingly, M1 and F2 began dating and became a very happy couple. F2 felt it was necessary to inform F1, which was understandable, and F1 severed contact about a week later because she felt betrayed. This reaction was also reasonable. This is where the situation starts to become my concern. I learned that F1 and F2 had spoken, and I checked in on F2, expressing my desire to remain uninvolved. I told F2 that while I was happy for both her and M1, I found her decision to pursue a relationship with M1 to be questionable regarding our friendship. I then checked on F1 and communicated the same message of wanting to avoid involvement. I could be there to listen and provide minimal advice, but nothing more. F1 did not react positively, although she did not act on her feelings immediately. Another fast forward to September, my boyfriend and I decided to move in together, a significant step in our relationship, so we intended to host a housewarming party, and I invited the entire friend group to celebrate. I had the opportunity to invite F2 in person, providing her the option to abstain from attending if she felt uncomfortable. Unfortunately, I could not invite F1 in person due to scheduling conflicts, so I sent her a text conveying that I would love for her to attend, but that she could decline if she felt uncomfortable with both of them in the same space. F1 initially accepted, but changed her mind 2 days later after I canceled some plans with her. The cancellation is an important detail. However, F1 did so with a vague message, leading me to ask if she was all right. F1 became angry with me, prompting us to agree to meet in person because text conversations were not effective. During our meeting, F1 expressed confusion over how I could maintain a friendship with F2 after F2's perceived betrayal. F1 accused me of being a bad friend, saying I was unreliable, and stated it was unfair that I offered both F1 and F2 the same options when it was clear that F1 was the victim in this scenario. I asked F1 what she wished for me to do regarding the housewarming party, to which she replied that I should uninvite F2 and M1. I discussed this with my therapist, who was left speechless after hearing the entire story. My therapist advised that I should do what felt right, as this was my celebration, and suggested that F1 was acting as if she were attending my wedding inappropriately. Ultimately, I did not uninvite anyone, and F1 chose not to attend. Instead, she informed me that she needed time to determine whether our friendship shared enough common values to continue, which I understood. Perhaps not entirely, but it was ultimately her decision, and I told her to contact me when she reached a decision so I would not be left in a state of uncertainty regarding our friendship. After 3 months, F1 texted me, expressing a desire to maintain the friendship but questioned whether I had sufficient space in my life for friends. This made me feel uncomfortable, so I replied that I had space, just not as much as before since I needed to focus more on my studies if I aimed to pursue a PhD, as my performance is heavily weighted on grades. F1 agreed, and we met for lunch twice, around early December. By then, I was once again overwhelmed with a full master's workload, whereas F1 was only taking half the semester. This isn't to downplay her commitments. However, in comparison, she was considerably less occupied than I was during that period. Prior to those 2 lunches, we had established that I would attempt to be less unreliable and make more time for F1. However, once December arrived, I entered full study mode, which F1 should have comprehended, as I withdrew from virtually all my friends except those I encountered in class. Otherwise, my grades would suffer. It's essential to note that F1 was aware of my exceptionally heavy schedule due to my master's thesis, deadlines, and exams, and I was already pushing my limits to see her during those 2 lunches because F1 was often unwilling to come see me, necessitating my travel. Now, in mid-January, approximately 3 weeks ago, I received news that my last grandparent was nearing death. Not an enjoyable situation. On top of this, I was facing 7 university exams. For context, if anyone is familiar with KUL in Belgium, this is quite a lot and thesis work. In contrast, F1 had 3 exams and no thesis commitments. F1 invited me once to join her for pilates, but I had to turn her down due to my study requirements. A week ago, we received a call urging us to visit my grandfather because his condition had worsened. The only people aware were my boyfriend and F1, as we were providing each other with mental support during this challenging time. In those days, I texted F1 to check in and expressed my sadness over our missed encounters in the library while studying. F1 erupted again, expressing her anger at my apparent disappearance. I acknowledged her feelings, realizing I should have informed her that I was preoccupied with exams, something she was already aware of from our previous lunches. I then informed F1 that I was on my way to see my grandfather, who is in another country, as it was an emergency, and my mind was occupied with that situation. F1 replied with an apology and expressed her wishes for me to find strength, then mentioned that her parents were also arguing and that she had spent many days alone during this exam period. While I found this valid, I thought about how I also spent most of my days at home alone, as even my boyfriend was not around, yet I did not complain about it. F1 then stated that this situation replicated the past dynamics, claiming I disappear, refused to share details about my life, and expect her to welcome me back at my convenience. This was a direct quote from F1's messages. I still fail to comprehend how my attempts to reconnect with her are perceived this way, but I assume F1 has her own reasons. A minor detail to consider is that F1's other friends also retreat during exam seasons, with no issues resulting. Yet, when I do it, suddenly it becomes a problem. Moreover, F1 has previously admitted that she struggles to remain alone for more than a day due to discomfort. Currently, I find myself at a loss regarding this friendship. Although I dislike severing ties and relinquishing people from my life, I am beginning to feel that it may be necessary with F1. Does anyone have any insightful suggestions to help me navigate this situation? Am I at fault? Is there anything I can improve on? Additionally, I would like to clarify that this is my perspective, and I recognize that F1 is a human being and has her own viewpoint on the situation. I understand she may feel isolated, especially since the other individuals in our mutual friend group have stated they prefer to avoid this complicated scenario. I understand that F1 expressed some sentiments when she was struggling to process her emotions. When I inquired about F1's therapy progress, she mentioned she ceased attending because her therapist was not a suitable fit. However, she is reluctant to seek a new therapist due to perceived effort. I do not wish to invalidate F1's feelings. I am simply sharing my perspective and feelings regarding the circumstances. Story 3. MILF/57 and ex-boyfriend M/52 at the end of their stretch. Still live together with us. Hello everyone. Your friendly neighborhood Big Air here. The characters involved in this post are me, male, 31 fiancé, female, 28 mother-in-law, female, 57 ex-boyfriend, male, 52 ex-boyfriend's son, male, 12. The context of the story requires some understanding of the background of how this colorful array of personalities might have led to such a significant burnout of conflicts. Here we go. I work as a traveling contractor for the United States, and my lovely fiancé of 4 years agreed that she would finance a home for us if I ever decided to retire or if my business failed. Well, that moment arrived last year, and bless her kind soul, she fulfilled her promise. I moved in with her, only to discover that she had also brought her mother along and was dating a single father of a teenage child for nearly a decade. I had heard bits and pieces about this relationship during various phone conversations. She had been captivated by his kindness and rugged nature in the beginning, particularly as she was divorced and left alone after all 3 of her children had matured into successful adults. Although in her vulnerable state her emotions conflicted, she continued the relationship with this man amidst family toxicity, custody battles, and even potential homelessness. All this to say that when I arrived, none of the affection appeared to remain. They argue incessantly, "We have no food. Laundry needs to be washed or folded. You spend too much time playing video games. Who are you talking to on the phone? This money is insufficient," etc. You can replay this in your mind with different voices as both express each grievance interchangeably. They have not held back in their private conversations with me. She believes he is a constant cheater and a liar, he is misogynistic, and he cannot make sound decisions due to a troubled upbringing. Yet, she acknowledges he is good in bed, and that his son, despite struggling in school, deserves a better opportunity in life, with or without his father. He asserts that he wants to conclude his court appointments and recover his vehicle so he can contribute more financially to the household, and she cannot comprehend or bring herself to support him. She has always lived one way and is trying to change him into someone he is not. He insists he is not cheating, and no matter how many times he shows her his phone, invites her into his daily activities, or stays close to her, she will never trust him completely. He prioritizes his son and his upbringing, but feels incapable of disciplining him without causing lasting damage while simultaneously criticizing her methods of punishment on the sidelines. For example, no electronics are allowed because he continues to fail classes. He received new headphones and a new cell phone on New Year's as a way to ease the burden. Everyone around him tells him she is the best thing that has ever happened to him, and he knows he could risk returning to homelessness without her. The son has also involved himself in the situation, bypassing the obvious. You are truly failing in middle school. He has broken controllers for televisions and game consoles, openly cursed around the house as a joke, walked around the home in his underwear, abused family pets, and even attempted to use his parents' disputes to gain favoritism, although we all remain uncertain how that would be beneficial for him. It is safe to say that his antics add to the pressure on both of them. My fiancé and I remain without living space in the basement, but as previously mentioned, we cannot completely distance ourselves from this unfortunate situation. She has even warned me that she wants them all gone for peace of mind in our relationship. Being the primary breadwinner of the household, I struggle to see how that alone is not enough to fulfill her wish. I digress. I have tried to have discussions with both of them in a therapeutic setting, but she could not refrain from oversharing or attacking his character, and he shut down as quickly as he prepared himself a sandwich. With distractions from the son, it became evident how dysfunctional this situation has become. Now that we are on to recent developments, let's get to the core of the matter. They have agreed to separate. The ex-boyfriend's last days will occur when he settles the final payment for his vehicle. The mother-in-law is trying to distance herself from his influence. She has everyone eat separately, either extending her babysitting of her second son's child, a 3-month-old daughter, or hanging out with her friends. My fiancée has locked herself in her bedroom and has started wearing headphones even while sleeping. I am currently on a plane visiting my family for a week and have understandably been dreading my eventual return. Is there any remote chance that this relationship can survive when I come back? I would like to know if the Reddit community can provide me with some perspective on how this drastic upheaval might play out in the long term. Any comments are welcome. Feel free to express your thoughts.